With 2020 6 months in our rearview mirror and things starting to return to normal, especially when it comes to fandoms, with the movies coming back, big blockbusters premiering, whether it's Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, The Suicide Squad, all these movies, I thought, why not look back at the year that most of us would want to forget? I mean, I know it's only 6 months late, right? It's not that big of a deal. So, we're going to start with my top 10 least favorite movies of last year. Now, normally I would only include movies that I saw in theaters. However, given the circumstances from last year, there will be movies that premiered on streaming services on both this list and my best of last year list as well. So let's look back at the year that most of us would like to forget. This is my least favorite movies of 2020. Coming in at number 10, we have Liam Neeson's Honest Thief. Now, I didn't think this movie was terrible. If it's on TV, you like Liam Neeson, it's not a bad watch. The action's okay, the story's interesting at times, but where this movie really falls flat is if you've seen a ton of Liam Neeson movies and you have a certain idea of what those movies are going to be in your head. Now, yes, it has been said that many of his movies seem to be very, very similar, especially recently. And this one is similar to a certain degree, but it's also different because where I think most of his recently have been rated R, this one's rated PG-13. So you don't have the level of violence, the level of gore that you might be expecting. You don't have the constant swearing. It just doesn't really feel like what you might expect from one of his films. Also, I found it to be very slow paced. I found myself uninterested in the supporting cast. It just did not hold up for me. And like I said, it's not total garbage, but when you go in expecting one thing and you get something else, it can be disappointing. So for me, I would give this movie the ranking of Street Thug, where it's not terrible, but it's also not great, and you're not missing anything if you don't watch it. But if you see it, you don't feel like you completely wasted your time. Coming in at number 9, we have Call of the Wild. Now, I'll be frank, I have not read this book in a very long time, and the only reason for me that this film didn't make it higher on my dislike list is because of Harrison Ford. I just like Harrison Ford. I mean, I love Star Wars, I love Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark is my first or second favorite movie of all time. So, I just enjoy when Harrison Ford's in a movie. And that is definitely what saved this one for me. Because everything leading up to where he really shows up and his interaction with the dog, which was good, the story just, for me, felt flat. It was boring. And like many people have said already, the CG dog sucks. That is what takes you out of this movie. And it just does not work. Now, there are certain times in movies where you know something is CG because it can't happen in real life, but you accept it and it works. Here, it's not like dogs don't exist. You could have gotten a real dog to do what this one did. And that's why it really is noticeable, and that's why the movie does not work overall. So for me, I would probably give this movie right between Street Thug and Minion. Because you take Harrison Ford out of it, yeah, it's definitely a Minion movie. I would not recommend it. But if you like Harrison Ford, and because he's in it, I have a hard time giving it that lower rating. Coming in at number 8 is a movie that pretty much everybody had on their list, and that is Artemis Fowl. Now, before watching this movie, I had no context about the story. I knew the title, that was it. The one really good thing that came out of this movie was I went and listened to the books, which are definitely better. This movie is not a total train wreck. I think they did do some decent world building. They didn't do enough because there were times I'm like, wait, what's going on? I enjoyed the characters overall. But they never did that thing to really entice you, to really pull you into this world, make you on the edge of your seat and be like, wow, this is great, this is amazing. The narrative also just never really felt strong, which definitely would have helped with the audience connecting with the story, the characters, the plot, what was going on. I don't blame the actors entirely for this because it had some really well-known, some really good actors in there that we know can do better than what this movie provided. And for me, I just didn't like the whole idea of Josh Gad's character narrating the movie, doing voiceover work for the entire thing. Maybe have him at the very beginning for like 2 minutes to get you into what happened. He doesn't need to keep popping up through the entire movie. That got distracting. So for me, I'm going to give this movie a rating of Minion. Because at least it looked pretty good. They had okay characters. They did decent world building. But most importantly, they got me interested enough to want to read the actual books. Coming in at number 7 is Fantasy Island. Now, I'm not a horror person. I've been trying to get more into horror recently just so I can broaden my horizons when it comes to these different genres and different types of movie. And when I heard that Fantasy Island was going to be a horror movie, and just the whole premise of it sounded interesting. I had never seen the original TV show, so I had no background when it came to that. And the movie starts off okay. You know, the idea, the concept, the characters, yeah, overall they work. But then once things get going and the plot starts to be revealed and you see exactly what's going on, you're like, really? This is what I've been watching? This is why certain things happen? And I don't love getting really, really scared to the point that I'll have nightmares or need to have lights on for a while. But when I go into a movie that I'm thinking is going to be a horror film, I'm expecting to be scared a little bit. And I really wasn't scared with this movie. I didn't feel like it accomplished that goal. The actors and actresses were okay. I always have a problem with saying that the actors or actresses are completely at fault unless it's very obvious that they just weren't right for the part, or there's so much that part of the problem does come from them. Here, I just think it was a story. I think they were trying to do too much with it. I feel like they start off with one idea, and then by the end of it, they're like, oh, well, what if we had this? And this will surprise the audience. But that just didn't meld together. It didn't form a coherent film. It didn't deliver on the real suspense. It didn't deliver on the horror. I mean, there were some moments where like, okay, well, what's going on? But I never felt like I was doing this, like, oh my gosh, what's going on, what's going on? I was more like this, like, oh, okay. So, I would give Fantasy Island ranking of Minion. I know, I've said that a lot. I just feel like this had potential. They had a good idea. They had an interesting idea from what I've heard with the TV show. They just really could not execute it. And it's a movie that I wouldn't say go watch. But if you're interested, I wouldn't say don't see it. Just know that chances are this is not what you're expecting at all from a movie titled Fantasy Island. Coming in at number 6, we have Underwater. What I thought was good about this movie was definitely the underwater aspect of it. I liked this spooky, scientific type labs down there. I definitely thought that idea was interesting. And even having a monster down there. Like, I think people have said Alien, but underwater. That would have been really cool. And there were definitely aspects of that here. But my biggest problem with it was I just didn't care about any of the characters. Now, part of me was like, okay, well, we don't want to see people die. We do want to see people make it. But honestly, I was like, oh, well, there goes another one. Oh, okay. No big deal. Oh, another one bites the dust. And that is not what you want from a movie like this. This type of movie, if, again, we compare it to Alien or Aliens, you want to feel like you want your characters to survive. You want them to get out of this deadly situation that they're in. And I just didn't care. I did think the other underwater suits that they used were cool. The scenes where they're actually walking on the surface of the ocean was neat. I am guessing they must have used either the submersion tanks to film that stuff, or if it was CG, it was pretty good CG. But I can't recommend this movie. So I'm going to give it, though, like so many, Minion, because there are definitely aspects of it that are interesting. And if you're into, visual style, or if you want to try and see what doesn't work, then yeah, this is definitely a movie to watch. But it definitely feels like one that they just threw together. They wanted to get out there. And if I remember correctly, it originally did come out in January. So, as they say, January is the cursed month. At least it was at one point. In number 5, I have a movie that I feel weird putting there, but at the same point, it's just not for me. It's not my type of movie. I feel like I only watched it just to see if it was good at all, or maybe to see if it was bad that I could put it on this list. I don't know. And that movie is The Photograph. Now, I know this movie has important things about legacy, about friendship, family, love, has all that stuff. And it does it well. But that's not for me. It was not my type of film. I just cannot recommend it. I was bored. I wanted to turn it off at times, but I have a hard time turning movies off. I much rather watch them the whole way through, because you never know, maybe the ending's going to be great. But this is a movie I really, really, really cannot recommend at all, unless it's your type of movie where you like stories about couples, you like story about family, and lost loves or legacies, like I've said. But that's not for me. That's the only reason, though, why I'm going to give this movie Minion, because I know there's going to be people out there that really love this movie, really connect with it. I just did not. Coming in at number 4, we have Gretel and Hansel. Now, this movie looked interesting, and it looked really strange from the trailers. I had no idea what they were going for with this. The trailers didn't really give anything away. And the movie itself is definitely unique. It's a unique, different take on the Hansel Gretel story. Visually, it's very different. It's hard to explain. There's a lot of weird imagery. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that if you talk to somebody who really understood this type of storytelling or understood visuals, or even the director, the screenwriter, they probably explain, oh, well, this means this and this means that. And that is why I say it's at least interesting to a certain degree, because it's so different, it's strange, it's weird, but that will only take you so far. Honestly, I don't remember really much about this movie, except that it was, again, weird. So, I'm going to say this movie is villain, because I really, really can't recommend it. But it does have some interesting visuals. So if you're into just that stuff, then maybe check it out. But overall, this movie really doesn't have anything, in my opinion, going for it. Coming in at number 3, we have The Rhythm Section. Now, I was actually quite interested in this movie when I heard, oh, it's a female James Bond or it's a female Jason Bourne. Because I enjoy those types of movies. But when I finally sat down and watched this, I was very disappointed. Because they did give you a decent backstory on the main character. But the people she came into contact with, the Jude Law character that I would consider be her mentor type person, you really wanted more and you didn't completely understand him. I felt like there were so many plot points that they just said, okay, well, we got to go to this place or we're going to have this happen. And it just didn't make sense. It didn't flow. You didn't understand why certain things were happening. The action was severely lackluster, especially with what I was hoping for or expecting. And this is a movie that I just say, just avoid. You are going to be hoping or wanting one thing if you go in thinking Jason Bourne or James Bond, like I did. And you're going to be very disappointed. So I'm going to say this movie gets a ranking of villain. Because I really can't think of anything in this movie that saves it at all. Except for maybe the fact that Blake Lively and Jude Law are in it. If you like them as actors, then yeah, you might want to check it out. And I'd like to think they're at least trying in it. Coming in second place, we have Downhill. See my face? Yeah, that's how it was for pretty much this entire movie. And the movie is a comedy with comedians that I know can be funny. Now, that's not to mean there wasn't one or two moments that I did kind of smile and laugh at. Because I feel like pretty much any movie, even the worst movie, might have a moment where you chuckle or smile. But this movie was so boring. I was expecting a laugh riot. I didn't need the story to be that complicated, but I thought there'd be a little bit more complexity to the characters. I thought the story overall would make sense. I thought I'd be laughing for 90% of it. I just didn't get any of that with this movie. And who I was seeing it with normally would laugh at a lot of things. And this was their type of movie. Yeah, even they were like, this movie was bad. That's an hour and a half, 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. And I definitely agree with that. So this movie gets villain. Completely ignore it. Don't waste your time. Go do something more productive. Anything but watch this movie. But coming in at number one as my least favorite or worst movie of 2020 is The Grudge. Had no plot. I don't even remember what was going on. I didn't understand it. I knew there was something with this house that was haunted or they were seeing things that was never made clear. I just completely did not understand what was going on. Wasn't scary. Made no sense. Honestly, that's really all I can say about it. There was nothing about this movie to save it even in the slightest. This is one of those movies that you're like, how did this make it past either conception or production? Did they not realize that this was going to be a bad movie? Was this a movie that the actors showed up in just to get a paycheck? Whatever the case, The Grudge definitely gets the ranking of villain. Don't even waste your time. Another movie that I can just be like, you have much better things to go and do. Watch almost any other movie on this list over this one. And there you have it. My least favorite, or what I would consider the worst movies of 2020. Starting again, quick overview from number 10, we had Honest Thief. Number 9 was Call of the Wild. Number 8 was Artemis Fowl. Number 7 was Fantasy Island. Number 6 was Underwater. Number 5 was The Photograph. Number 4 was Gretel and Hansel. Number 3 was The Rhythm Section. Number 2 was Downhill. And in number 1, we had The Grudge. Now, I know a lot of time goes into making movies. Not that I've ever done it, but I know the time, the effort, the sweat that people put into these movies. So I really feel bad about saying that they're the worst movies of 2020. And I know there's probably somebody out there that will like every single one of these films. But for me, these are the movies that I just did not like. I didn't care for them. So these are my least favorite movies from 2020. Coming up next, we will have the best of 2020. These are going to be the movies that I really liked, and I definitely recommend you watch. So, until next time, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.